Now that I had time to be more specific in my observations, I perceived that we were riding a hopper car with a wide porch corroded into an eerie likeness of an aerial photo of Arctic ice floes. Perhaps sulfuric acid had been spilled there. I noticed that my naked palms soon began to sting if I left them against the metal very long. Fortunately, Steve and I both had gloves. Directly ahead, across the coupling, I saw a white thorax with ladders, and at the junction of its V-shaped ribs was a cloaca in which train hoppers and other train hoppers could hide. Steve made no bones about crossing back and forth when the train was moving. Jack London would have done it with Alain. I would have done it only if I'd had to. The freeway for Omaha veered left, and then we were out onto the rolling green prairie with pickup trucks whistling down the other freeway. I felt a pang to be going farther and farther away from the slender girls with silver belts and white cowboy hats and long legs, whose presence had decorated Cheyenne frontier days. Someday, one of them might have married me if I'd only tried hard enough. They were now replaced by black-eyed Susans and antelopes, then more antelopes behind the fence. Here came a huge refinery, cattails and river willows. The smell of baking creosote, which made Steve nauseous, I always liked. To me, it resembled booze. Now there were so many antelopes on the plains, then lovely cloud shadows, jade gray on the grass. The prairie suddenly dropped off on the south side of the track. The horizon as empty as Zen perfection. "Fucking buffalo," Steve was shouting in ecstasy. "Two buffalo out there." Our lives were as clean as thunderheads. Steve rushed over the coupling, gripped the ladder of the facing car, crouched fiercely, and gazed out at the world through his dark sunglasses. He was a king, and his crown was a baseball cap. His hands were in brand new work gloves from a Cheyenne hardware store. He wore a checkered shirt and jeans and threw back his head in regal magnificence. We stopped in the prairie to let pass another train with a sulfuric acid car and a hydrochloric acid car, many containers and boxcars all closed, some with graffitied faces and initials. A black car of corn sweetener trundled grandly past our corroded porch. The day was getting hotter and hotter. Since I am the first observer ever to have traveled in this unknown territory called Wyoming, I ought to describe the prairie's greennesses, undulations, wildcat oil wells, fences, hawks, and antelopes, some of which are black and white. Sometimes one can see the white desert sand beneath the grass. No human has ever been here. Other train riders must gain similar sensations, for after writing these lines in my journal, I read the following remarks of a depression boy who surely had survival on his mind, but could still feel the joyful wonder of hopping. Each time we crossed into another state, I felt like the early explorers. How can I say what I saw, heard, smelled, tasted, and felt in terra incognita? You may have visited Wyoming. You have probably seen grass. Very likely you followed a fence. You could be familiar with the outlines of antelopes. But have you seen what I've seen? Did I see what Steve saw? The Tang Dynasty hermit poet Cold Mountain, who was named after the wild place he inhabited, wrote, "People ask the way to Cold Mountain. Roads fall short of Cold Mountain. Ice stays all summer, fog dims the dawn sun. How did someone like me get here? Our minds are different. Otherwise, you could get here too. I never could have gotten to Cold Mountain because I lacked Cold Mountain's mind. I love cities as much as solitude, prostitutes as much as trees. And I'm proud this is so. Neither the ecstatic openness of Kerouac's road voyagers, nor the dogged cat and mouse triumphs of London's freight jumpers, and certainly not the canny navigations of Mark Twain's riverboat youth define me. I go my own bumbling way, alone and in company, beset by lapses in my bravery, energy, and charity, not knowing precisely where to go until I am there. That afternoon I was there, and those Wyoming hours have crystallized within my memory into a jewel of infinite depth, whose contemplation brings me joy. I possess a rainy night walk with Steve into the Roseville yard, and this thrillingly unbounded Wyoming afternoon. And I believe that I can hold eternity even without understanding it, because all afternoon we rode through green mounds of mystery with blue tableland ahead and rain clouds. Our freight train clanked, stopped, and started again. Then it began to highball toward everywhere, and its clatterings became as thrilling as the stamp of a flamenco dancer's feet. The night grew so cold that I had to break out the canvas painter's tarp I had bought in Laramie and wrap myself in it. We must have been crossing the Continental Divide. I slept badly, waking in fear every time we stopped in a yard, hiding from lights and voices. It kept getting colder and colder. Dawn was a blinding turquoise slit, this being the doorway seen obliquely from the wall. Thoreau advises us to reawaken and keep ourselves awake by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. Indeed, this dawn bore more infinitude than nearly any I had seen since my childhood and various solitudes on Arctic islands. It was the blue that this earth might show to an astronaut, glowing from within, promising, lovely without warmth, above all, far away. Presently, shape and texture stole back into the world, so that my gaze, led away from me by a lovely trail of light across the wood grain of the boxcar floor, reached the edge of my moving frame of reference and expanded into a newborn desert universe whose coolness had not yet bled away and whose solitudes were unmarred by any spore of humanity. I stepped into the patch of light, gripped the boxcar door, and gazed out. Another long-necked antelope gazed back at me. Thank you very much. I'm hoping that some of you feel like having a drink with me across the street. Before that happens, I'll sit here and sign books and talk to everybody. And before that happens, if anyone has any questions, that's great. And if not, that's okay too. Any questions?